Hi, everybody. Welcome to the National Zero Waste Conference, 2-day conference. Today is the business day, tomorrow community day. I'm Rick Anthony. I'm on the board of directors of Zero Waste USA, and it's a pleasure to have you here. We have a very nice turnout of activists of zero wasters. I want to introduce our host for today, which is somebody I've worked with for over 20 years. We helped found the Zero Waste U.S. Business Council, which then evolved to the GR Global Green Business Council True Zero Waste Program, with over 1,000 now members that are out there working as certified zero wasters. So Stephanie Barger. Stephanie's done a lot of work putting this together to bring together some of the finest businesses who are going to showcase and talk about how they got to where they're working towards zero waste. I give you now our host, Stephanie Barger.
Great. Thank you, Rick. And thank you all for joining us. We are so excited for today. As Rick said, my name is Stephanie Barger. I'm the director of the True Zero Waste Program with the U.S. Green Building Council and Green Business Certification, Inc. First of all, I want to thank Zero Waste USA and all of our incredible sponsors. Without them, this conference would not be happening. And because of all the sponsors, we were able to offer a very affordable conference and discounts and student rates and scholarships. So this will be recorded. So give us a couple of weeks. And part of the goal of this conference is to create this amazing library of case studies and information that people can go back to. So we already have the 2020 and 2021 recordings are up on the website. So we hope that you will keep utilizing this. I also want to thank all the incredible volunteers, the key ones with Ruth's team, Amanda, Chris, Alex, Laura, and all the other wonderful volunteers. I also want to thank my co-hosts, which is Chris Detournay and Jill Danello. As discussed before, please utilize the chat. This is an opportunity to network. This is our virtual world, so you can network, you can ask questions. We'll be looking at that throughout the entire conference. Now, to formally kick off the National Zero Waste Conference 2022, Day 1, our goal is that this is a movement. It's much more than a conference. And so from here, we want you to take all the information that you're gathering and really expedite our goal to get a zero waste economy for all. And we've come a long way. When Rick and I first started, it's like saying zero waste was a bad word, and companies wouldn't even put it in their marketing materials or barely say it. And so now everything is about circularity, zero waste, closed loop, and it's really exciting. And the other purpose of this conference is to make it easy for everyone. Zero waste it's not rocket science, right? And it's more a shift in our mentality, our way of thinking. And of course, we have to have the robust infrastructure that only comes about through advocacy. So that's advocacy in our community, it's advocacy through legislation, it's advocacy within your own business. So we have to be loud, we have to speak out, we have to be collaborative. And as we all know, time is of the essence. And this is a pillar of, for U.S. Green Building Council. We also realize that we have to expedite sustainability. So part of this is lifting everybody up. So all of you, please reach out to small businesses, small communities, those that are just getting started, and get this information to them, collaborate with them, share with them, let them know that it's a win-win for everybody. And so with that, my last request, I had this last year also, is for us to completely eliminate waste management plans. Let's turn them into zero waste plans, material management plans, commodity management plans, because there is no waste. There are hard to recycle materials or materials that shouldn't be produced, but there is no waste. Everything, especially right now, is very, very valuable, and we need to make the most of that. So with that, we're going to bring up our first panel, which is one of the first R's of the zero waste hierarchy, is to redesign. So I think we're going to be bringing up that presentation, and I'm so excited about this panel because these are really leaders and recreating our economy and how we think. So our panel, like I said, is designing for zero waste, and we have some great speakers next. So this is myself, I'll be moderating. And then we have Martis Bagley, who has an amazing firm, and I want to go see his redesign showcase. So you can go look at all these different materials and touch and feel and really understand. And you'll hear from him how innovative it's been. And I'm just so excited that our worlds came together, Martis, and that we can really reshape what we're doing. And then next up, we have Rachel Gear. Rachel, next. Let's see, we're having a little problems with our slides moving forward. So Rachel is one of our young, exciting people in this world. So she's going to present on her work on creating a circular decision tree for all of us. And I just think it's so exciting that our young people are so much farther ahead in their learning, in their understanding, and this is what will propel us forward. So we're really excited to have met Rachel and have her part. And then last up as our speaker is my dear friend, Ryan McMullen. He used to be with Toyota, and he helped create our True Zero Waste program. And so he now works with the Mattress Council, and of course has taken all of his amazing knowledge and really helped rethink and reshape how we're looking at a simple item like mattresses, but that has a huge environmental impact. So I hope you can take what Ryan is presenting and apply it to anything that we're making and using. So with that, we're going to kick it off, and Martis is going to lead with his redesign. Thank you, Martis.
Thank you, Stephanie. What a wonderful intro. I love the reminder that there is no waste. So we need to quit creating waste. And that's what we try to do at my firm, Nonfiction Design. Next slide, please. So I'm an industrial designer. I create tons of products all over the world. And many years ago, stepped back and said, what's the impact of this on the world? And started to change how we create products and what we want to do, what we want our negative impact to become a positive impact. So we at Nonfiction like to say, we turn science fiction into reality for a better future. And what that really means is we work with scientists, innovators all over the world in small companies and large to bring these crazy ideas that are world changing to reality. Next slide. And how we do this is we leverage materials among many other different things. And you might see right behind me is our material library. This is the first floor of our design studio. And we partnered with a company called Material Connection so we could bring materials into our space, so we can have honest conversations with all of our clients about how can we change the world? How can we design for something different and eliminate waste? You know, when companies are looking at investing millions upon millions of dollars into a product, you know, it's hard to change from their go-to market, their comfort zone, their 5 to 10 materials that they use over and over again. So putting it into their hands opens their mind, opens their idea, that allows them to dream about a new world with new materials. Next slide. So today, I'm going to share with you 3 products that we've created over the years. And the first one is by the House of Marley. This was done long before we started our own studio, my partner and I, in fact, about 14 years ago. And if you don't recognize this guy, this is in fact Bob Marley, famous reggae icon, music icon, world famous. And the sons of daughters of Bob Marley came to us and said, we want to design an audio brand that really highlights the legacy of Bob Marley. Next slide. And so we said, well, how do we really do this? How do we highlight his legacy in an honest and genuine way? We could go out and just make a bunch of headphones and audio products, but we said, let's dive in a little bit deeper. We did a deep strategy to understand who Bob Marley was. And he's a loving person. He's a giving person. He gave through his music, he gave through life, and he always tried to raise everyone up. In fact, his album's called One Love, and that's what he was all about. And we said, well, maybe One Love isn't just about loving individual, but it's also about loving the planet as well. Next slide. So we designed a program where we built products around FSC certified woods from sustainably grown forests. We used bamboos, we used aluminums, which are the most recyclable metal on the planet. We used reground silicone, recycled paper, and things like that to create a story of products, next slide, that actually captures the essence of what Bob Marley was about. On top of this, we designed them for disassembly. And this is hugely important to the eliminating waste conversation. If we can design things that can easily be pulled apart, put in the respective recycling bins or even upcycling bins, then they can be used again and again or broken down naturally into the environment to become food for planet Earth, like we often see in compost. So this is what we did. And after 14 years of this brand being out there, from a small startup to where they're at now, selling products in most every big box retailer around, we count that as a win. And it wouldn't be as possible without the story of sustainability, without the story of what we now call circularity, and even talk about having zero waste. Because once you design a brand with such a strong strategy and brand identity, the consumers buy into it, the investors buy into it, and in a funny way, the brand can never change, and we're very thankful for that, and we know the planet is as well. Next slide. The next product I'd like to talk about is the Kala Trio. Now, Kala Health designed a technology that helps people with essential tremors. And if you don't know what essential tremors are, they're when the hands and other parts of the body tend to shake, similar to Parkinson's disease. Well, typically this is, the therapy is applied by a very deeply invasive surgery done onto the brain to add a stimulator to the nerves to then calm down the hands. Well, the problem is nobody wants a deep surgery. The other option is a lot of drugs. So they designed a concept where it actually applies electricity as a medicine to the point of the problem right on the wrist. So suddenly people can go from writing, not being able to write a letter to their grandkids to writing a letter. They can now type on computers. They can drink a cup of coffee. Things that we all take for granted. Next slide, please. In doing this, the FDA gets involved, and rightfully so. We want to create good, safe products for people, but oftentimes we cannot do the things we would love to do in designing, for zero waste or circularity or even recycling. Next slide, please. But what we can do is pick the low-hanging fruit, and that is packaging. And this is not to be overlooked, because when we look at packaging, it's such an easy win. For instance, we said, let's not put a glossy packaging with a laminate, a bunch of caustic chemicals printed onto it into the market or even into the office of a clinician. Let's ship the product directly to the consumer. Let's print low VOC, low chemical, soy-based inks onto the packaging. Let's remove some of the quick start guide by actually printing the instructions directly onto the packaging. And then finally, one of the big wins was we removed plastic altogether from the packaging by getting rid of the clamshell and those twist ties that hold your product down. We did this by sort of a compression of the packaging using the travel satchel and the instruction guide to actually hold everything in place so it doesn't bounce around and get damaged during shipping. And this really lowered the carbon footprint of the entire program for them. Next slide, please. And if you don't believe me that removing plastics from packaging is a big deal, Look at this slide from Material Connection. 53% of plastics go into packaging. 53% of all the products we make, the plastic goes into packaging. That's the clamshell, that's the twist ties, that's all these different devices that we do to create safe packaging, to create beautiful packaging. And I think we can get around that. So change your packaging and make it better for the environment. And it's an easy win for all of us. Next slide. And then finally, the last project we worked on is a project for the country of Singapore, supported by investors and the government of Singapore, to redesign education. And this is all about believing in adaptability for future generations. We know the world is changing fast. We know that AI and machine learning is changing what it means to work. And we don't know what those future careers will entail. We don't know how to train people. We can certainly train through traditional STEM. We can train through things we already understand, but how do we create creativity and mindfulness to children so they can have autonomous lives moving forward? Next slide. So what we did is we broke out the strategy for MOVITA, the School of Lifelong Learning, into 5 key categories. And you'll see right up the upper right, first off is sustainable systems. That's what we're talking about. We think about resilience and adaptability, abundance of materials, food. We think of regeneration, carbon neutrality, things like that. On top of that, we think about synesthetic learning and neurodiversity, so everyone can learn in the way they learn best. A hackable school, because to change it, we need to break it first and rebuild it. A borderless education, let's get to know our neighbors and how they think and their concerns, and mental health and happiness. All this together will create what we call human autonomy and allow kids to make good decisions moving forward. So while this is a huge project, let's focus on sustainable systems moving forward to give you a little sense of how it plays into our thinking about removing waste from our world. Next slide. So we thought about architecture as a whole. You know, architecture is oftentimes filled with, energy systems that are, using fuels and are not necessarily good for the environment. So what if we have architecture that breathes with the seasons and the temperature throughout the day? It lets light in to warm the room and then closes the shutters automatically to cool it off when it gets hot. What if we talk about alternative energies, not just solar, but geothermal energy? What about biofuels? How can we change this energy paradigm for the school? And then finally, materials. We can think about things. As we move away from waste, we have to think about things as recycling, and then upcycling, taking what we consider waste materials and turning them into food for the planet or food for other systems. Next slide. So this is why we introduced a company to the school program called Precious Plastic. And Precious Plastic creates these really cool, very affordable products that actually re-inject recycled plastics through extrusion, through plate plastics. And we introduce these in the workshop. The kids actually start to experience what happens when we throw a piece of plastic away. Can we reform it and reuse it again? Next slide, please. So we designed a system where kids are starting to build their own environment. They're starting to construct their own tables at their own height. Because we talk about neurodiversity, what works best for that individual? Let's let the kids build their future world starting in a classroom, one classroom at a time. Next slide. And so, this project is big. It's still going on, but we've built it virtually because our clients are in Singapore. We built it virtually, and we invite them into our virtual environment to all interact with the school and have good conversations moving forward about how we can create a better future for ourselves and future generations. Next slide. So with that, I want to give you 3 takeaways today, and I want you to remember these. The first one, storytelling is an essential tool to behavior change. Without having that really strong story that aligned with Bob Marley's love for people and planet, without telling the story of designing for disassembly. I think when things got tough or the economy tanked, we may not have that beautiful product that is designed to eliminate waste. So storytelling is essential tool for behavior change. Second one, it's not always about the product. Packaging for the win. As we saw, we can remove a ton of carbon footprint by removing that packaging easily, the plastic in the packaging easily. And then finally, education is a key to a sustainable future. This one, we all know it, but we need to practice it too. Next slide. Thank you so much. My name is Martis Bagley. My company's name is Nonfiction. You can check us out at www.nonfiction.design. And I'm looking forward to a fantastic rest of the conference. And with that, I will pass it off to Rachel.
Yes, thank you, Martis. Can everyone hear me okay? Maybe give a thumbs up. Yes.
Sound good.
Thank you. Yes, so to give you a short introduction, my name is Rachel Greer, and I'm a circular economy and sustainability transitions advisor and researcher. Currently, I'm an independent consultant, but the research which I'm going to describe to you, I conducted in my current place of residence, the Netherlands, at the Dutch Research Institute for Transitions, or DRIFT. And today I'll be describing a tool that I created called the Circular Decision-Making Tree, as Stephanie already gave a nice little teaser of, and there should be an operational model to help businesses and other organizations in their zero waste or circular ambitions. Next. Yes, thank you. But first, to set the context, I think we all know because we're all here, but there's too much waste in the world right now, and most of this is attributable to the fact that we are still in a linear economy of a take-make-waste style of consumption and production. Within that context, the Netherlands has actually created the ambition to become fully circular by 2050. So there's big movements going on here. Next slide, please. Just to make sure we're all on the same page, I think the pictures say it more quickly than I'll be able to, but I think it's good to clarify my definition of circular economy to make sure it matches yours. But the main aims are to slow resource loops, close resource loops, and narrow resource loops. So basically designing for longer life, things after production, and using fewer resources in general. But what this all comes down to, from my perspective, are two key principles, which is one, the least virgin material extraction from the earth, and two, the highest value preservation of the materials already in circulation in the economy. However, despite this ambition and understanding of circular economy in the Netherlands, and I can also say probably worldwide, there's a lack of meaningful progress in this transition. So we have where we are and where we want to be, but there hasn't been meaningful progress. As I said, there's some policies and innovations going on, but nothing that's concretely showing that we're making way on this transition. And I hypothesized from my research that a lot of this is because decision makers lack operational support in making more transformative decisions. So researchers are really busy with all of these topics on circular economy and advancing it, but often there's this lack of translation between research and practice, right? So next slide, please. That's why I thought, well, I can take it upon myself to develop a circular decision-making heuristic that can help guide decision makers through circular decisions or zero waste decisions in a more informed way. That's why I created, as I called it, the Circular Decision-Making Tree, or CDMT. My background's actually in industrial ecology, which has a lot to do with environmental assessment techniques and these type of evaluations, modelings, and waste hierarchies. So I thought it would make sense if I could combine this quantitative background I have with the qualitative research I was doing and combine it into something useful for practice. Next slide, please. So the CDMT I designed to be useful for pretty much anyone, let's say, who's making circular decisions, but that could be at any point in the process. So if we're thinking about policymakers, for example, that are trying to decide what policy proposal might have the most circular impact, let's say, or innovation teams at organizations trying to improve their corporate strategy, funders, entrepreneurs, or even consumers like us who are just deciding if they want to support circular economy or zero waste economy, how can they do that best? Next, please. So this is quite a lot to look at. You don't have to even read a single word on this, but I just wanted to have to offer you an overview of what the circular decision-making tree looks like before I break it down later for you. But so that you see there's like 3 distinct steps here. But before I do that, I'll go into a practical example to help you understand like the first column. Next slide, please. So I think we also heard from Martis, but plastic packaging and plastic in general is still very largely linear. The main thing that you can see from this, I would say, is like on the very left side in the middle. Out of all of the plastic that's in our stock, we're only at 2% closed loop recycling of that plastic. So 98% of it is having some material energy losses along the way. If it's being recycled, for example, reused, or that's even the best case scenario, it might also be dumped. This is from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Next slide, please. So I thought this could be a tangible example, like industry, to illustrate how the first, can't see white on pale blue. Well, it's okay, I'll just explain it to you. Yes, so plastic rescue is one initiative going on in the Netherlands. These stats are from the year 2019. It's the most recent one because of COVID. But what we have here are 18,000 people almost. It's a nationwide event, fishing plastic out of the canals. I think most people know the Netherlands is full of canals, and of course, plastic waste makes its way into there. So there's this nationwide event on one day where everyone pitches in and fishes plastic out of the canals, and then that can be, for example, 3D printed into one of these things for precious plastics, for example, which is a really nice initiative. However, this is an end-of-life solution because the plastic has already been created and trashed. So we're kind of behind the 8 ball, let's say, informally. And I thought, well, couldn't it be so much better if we could use that manpower of 18,000 people to create a more, let's say, circular innovation or innovation with more circular potential? Because this is great, but if nothing else changes, then we're still going to need 18,000 people every single year fishing out plastics from the canals. Next slide, please. So one incrementally better solution, this also reflects the zero waste hierarchy, is material substitution. So mostly this means replacing a current material flow, in this case plastics, with a different material flow that would be a more sustainable alternative. So there are many sustainable alternatives to this, but we could use the example of bioplastics as an incrementally, improved solution to the plastic waste. Next slide, please. But even better than that would be if we could reach dematerialization. So that means to reduce or eliminate the amount of material required for a product or process. In this simple example of plastics, I think we all know using a drinking fountain could be, yeah, you're dematerializing the plastic that's used, meaning it's not used at all. So this can be applied, I think, with almost all materials, but plastic, I think, is the most accessible for understanding. So next slide, please. So, I think it's out of, oh, there we go, yes. So this first column is what you saw before. If it's, I tried to make it readable, but if it's not, I'll explain it anyway. And then for anyone who's interested, my contact info is at the end of my presentation, and I can send you a PDF, which is quite clear. But the first column, which I'm describing to you, is basically the operational column. So this is the more hands-on, material-focused part of the circular decision-making tree. So when we're looking at this, this basically takes you through the steps I just showed you, but then from most circular to least circular option. So the CDMT in general is a sort of yes/no decision tree that if you follow these and answer the questions, even if you don't have an extensive background in environmental assessment techniques or circular economy, you should be able to independently navigate circular decisions. So first we look at if a waste stream is being created, can it be materialized? If yes, then we go to the next step. If a partial quantity can be reduced, we do that and go to the next step. And if not, then we take a look at material substitution. Is that possible? If it's unclear, it recommends you, for example, to a life cycle assessment, which can help you understand trade-offs or benefits, positives and negatives of making a switch. And if the answer is no, then we take a look at if the material or energy loop can be closed by using the flow as a resource in this current form without processing. Next slide, please. And then if that's possible, we do it. If it's not possible, then we take a look at if the material or energy loop can be closed by using the flow as a resource in its current form with little or no additional processing. If the answer is yes, move on. If the answer is no, then it continues like this. So it helps you step by step. Next slide, please. This one I'll go over quite briefly, but the second column is the strategic column. So once you've decided what would be the innovation or policy with the most circular potential, then we take a look at, can it be scaled up or diffused in its current form? Would this work in another context? Would it work financially to scale up? Or are there human resources, financial resources, time resources that eliminate this possibility? And this also leads you through a series of yes/no questions to see what the highest diffusion potential might be for this. So not only having a local innovation that doesn't have far-reaching impact, but how can we scale this up? Next slide, please. And next slide again. Thank you. And the final column is the reflexive column. So here we identify key process indicators, KPIs, and essentially after however much time you want, maybe a year, let's say, then we take our expected outcome in terms of the circular impact that this innovation or policy will have and reassess this. And this can also work for all other material flows. You can continue using this tool in a loop basically until you've addressed everything you want to. Next slide, please. I'll go quite quickly here, but in my research, I conducted workshops in the Netherlands, Brazil, South Africa, and the United Kingdom to test whether the internal logics and design of the tool were applicable in all of these distinct geopolitical contexts. Next slide. Next slide. That's us doing it. It was even translated to Portuguese, so that's a cool fun fact. It's international now. And now what's the current and future of the CDMT? Well, I was able to publish this in a paper this summer in the peer-reviewed Journal of Circular Economy and Sustainability. So it is an open access tool. I've published it to make it free for everyone. And the point of it is that it should also be usable and intuitive for everyone. However, I would like to also help people, for example, if they would like some teaching of how to use the tool a bit more in depth, or if there's some uncertainties. That's why I was actually contacted by the sustainability director of Erasmus University Rotterdam, and they want to use the CDMT on a university scale. And they've asked if I can come in and give a presentation to people in charge of procurement, so that way they can actually change the university strategy and make it become more circular based on the CDMT. So I think that's really cool that it's so valuable also in practice. And I would love to also test this in the US, as that's where I'm from, of course. Or I don't know if that's of course, but anyway, that isn't where we've tested it before, but I think it could also be extremely useful for helping any business or organization progress or accelerate towards their zero waste ambitions. So contact me, please, the next slide. if you want to know more, or if you'd just be interested in a PDF, or I can send you the publication link, which I had on the previous slide, or we can discuss working together. So my email's there on the bottom, greer.circularity@gmail.com, and my LinkedIn is there as well. So thank you for your attention. And now I pass it on to Ryan McMullen.
Thank you, Rachel, and congrats on getting published. Good morning, everybody. It's great to see so many familiar faces and names in the list. It's good to be back among my zero waste people. So what I'm going to share with you today is the work I've done with the Mattress Recycling Council and our efforts to really take a full value chain approach to making zero waste improvements, and kind of what it took and the methods we used to connect all those links in the chain. Next. This is me. Contact info is in the bottom right, but Stephanie already introduced me. Next. So the Mattress Recycling Council is a nonprofit that was formed by the mattress industry and specifically formed to operate recycling programs in states that have mattress recycling laws, which is currently, California, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, but Oregon is coming soon. They passed the law and it's beginning implementation. You may have seen it as Bye Bye Mattress if you're in one of those 3 states, which is kind of the consumer-facing awareness program. Next. So I think we all know that in order to actually achieve circularity and zero waste implementation, it requires coordination across really all of the parts of the value chain. But then that leads to the question of who's going to do the coordinating, like who's going to sit on top of it. You have some government programs like EPA Partnership for the Environment, which I was familiar with from my days in the automotive industry, to try to get manufacturers and suppliers to the table. But that's just part of the value chain. Well, fortunately, California's mattress recycling law really encouraged upstream mattress management. So not just waiting for the end of the consumer's use, but to really think upstream. And then the Mattress Recycling Council is able to bring the industry specific expertise about mattresses, the contacts with the manufacturers, contacts with the suppliers to provide that coordinating role. And this was particularly exciting for me because, like, coming from automotive, you have 5,000 components going into a car, 4 tiers of supply chain, and it's impossible to get your arms around the whole thing. But within the mattress industry, here's an opportunity to really get your arms around the entire value chain and get some circularity done. So I found that just really exciting. And we're just starting out, but we have been able to touch all of the parts of the value chain. Next. So, yep. This is
Hey Ryan, let's pause for a minute. Rose, why don't you stop sharing and I will share the PowerPoint because this version got a little small.
Thank you.
All right, here we go. Sorry about that, Ryan. Are you seeing that okay?
Yes.
All right, there we go. We tried this earlier.
Okay, do not adjust your television set. So yes, this is one of the things that we had to ask ourselves is like, okay, so we're the Mattress Recycling Council, we're a nonprofit, we sit outside of all these different companies who are competing with each other and supplying each other and doing different parts of that industry. So what is our role? What's our unique opportunity here to touch on these 5 phases of a product's life? And one of the key things we saw, and if you could hit the first next, is to move information from, so we know that materials are moving downstream, and that's kind of classic. And then one more click, MRC's role is to move information from recycling and from the next life of the materials upstream to the point where it can start to affect design and manufacture. So what we did was to try to create a real framework, a repeatable framework for cross value chain discussions to get all the people or the right people at the table, identify very specific actionable challenges that were identified by recyclers, by the manufacturers of the next product from recycled materials, and say, how can we solve these? Specifically, what we're not going to do is pick winners and losers and say, this company is good, this company is bad. We're not going to prescribe, this is the one true way, this is the best method. And we're also not going to go inside a company and solve their particular challenges. We're not creating regulations and we're not designing mattresses, but what we can do is frame a discussion and bring information. So that was how we thought about our role. And you can see in each of these steps, there are some specific things we've done. I'm going to go into detail on each of these. Next. So starting at recycling, next. This is where the program started and the state recycling law started, and there's several parts to supporting recycling, and I don't need to tell you all that it's a multi-step process, but the first chunk that we think about is education, consumer education, collection, and transport programs. So I mentioned the Bye Bye Mattress program that you can see the YouTube video on the right there. There are drop-off locations, there's collection events, there's commercial volume programs for like universities and hospitals that have a lot of mattresses to recycle all at once. And then finally, coordinating the transportation and logistics. The second part is actually supporting all of the independent recycling companies that break down mattresses and get them into the next commodity market. Right now, we have about an 80% collection rate, so 80% of the mattresses that are sold are getting recovered, and then within a mattress, 75% of the materials, a little north of 75, but over 75% of the materials are getting recycled into new products. And since these state programs have launched, we've recycled 10 million mattresses, so really having an impact there, and much to the interest of the communities, also preventing dumping and mattresses on the side of the road. But in order to make all that better, we also had to think about research and how to conduct research to improve collection efficiency, transportation efficiency, recyclers' processes, help them disassemble things, get cleaner products, and do it in less time so that it's more profitable for them and they can do it more. But then also to identify new markets for materials so recyclers have additional markets to sell into. Next. Thank you. So after recycling, well, that led us to ask, well, where is this material going? When recyclers disassemble it, sell it into the commodity markets, what is getting made from that? And what do they wish the recyclers knew? Next. And that's really recycling market development and actually reaching out to the next product manufacturer, such as carpet pad manufacturers who are taking the foam from recycled mattresses and turning it into carpet pad, and asking them, like, what challenges are you seeing when you receive a load from a mattress recycler? What's good, what's bad, what do you wish they knew? And to really provide that role of connecting those players and to bring the information upstream. The other part of recycling market development is to say, well, what else could this be used for? And so there's some novel research in partnership with universities to try to say, what else could we turn these mattress components into, particularly the ones that don't currently have a recycling outlet? And so some examples there of turning it into battery anode material or low carbon cement for concrete generation, et cetera. So that's the next life of the material, but then we knew we needed to go upstream. Next. So the first step is to think, what new products are being sold now? Next. And based on our research, the average lifespan of a mattress is about 11 years. So what we did is we assembled an expert panel of suppliers who are selling to manufacturers and introducing novel, innovative materials and saying, so for the mattresses that are being sold today, are there any materials in it that are going to be a recycling challenge 11 years from now? And to be that forward intelligence so that we know if we need to start developing new recycling techniques, new material identification techniques, etc. Next. And then moving further upstream and engaging manufacturing, we started actually a certification program and training program for mattress manufacturers. Next. And the thing about mattress manufacturing is, while there are some large, sophisticated national mattress manufacturers, there's also a zillion smaller companies that, you know, are ranging from 6 employees to 100 that are more family-owned, operated, local. They sell within 200 miles of where they create. It's a very localized, small industry. So what we did is we created this training and support program to help these companies start sustainability programs to reduce energy, water, and waste, and to focus on reductions that are going to both reduce environmental impact and save them money so that they can do it more, see the benefit, and then offer a certification where we can provide a third-party audit of their process and say, do they have a systematic continuous improvement program for improving the handling of their byproducts, reducing waste, reducing water. Next. Finally, like Martis was saying, you got to get back to design. So our last step is to try to figure out, how do we bring information to the design stage of a mattress. Next. So we formed this industry work group on circular design and brought together suppliers of mattress materials, such as adhesive suppliers, foam suppliers, the designers of the mattresses, and the manufacturers. And based on some earlier discussions, we realized we needed all 3 of them at the same table at the same time to really start to have productive circularity conversations. In addition, we brought the challenges from the recyclers and the next life markets to say, okay, here's how we can try to make circularity part of the design to make disassembly easier at the end of the consumer's use, but then also make sure that doesn't compromise the quality of the mattress and give it a long, durable use, because you're not helping anything if the mattress only lasts 4 years because you made it too easy to take apart. So it's really a balancing act. And the neat thing is, because essentially we're bringing competitors together, that we needed to find a framework for getting something done without having them share proprietary information. And what we did is we identified some very, very specific circular design opportunities. And we said, okay, mattress recyclers are telling us that it's a problem to separate polyurethane foam from latex foam. Here's a specific actionable challenge. Now let's get everybody to the table to discuss the challenge, and then they can go away from our group and compete to provide the best solution to have a more circular mattress. And so that framework kind of kept us in our role as the nonprofit, didn't violate any sort of proprietary information or non-competitive information, but still got the information from the recyclers in the next product life into the discussion. Next. So the neat thing about this, and I think where this is really starting to gain momentum, is that as we added each piece of this, in our role as MRC, as the coordinator, we were able to learn more about that stage of the value chain. And that helped us learn and helped us bring more pieces together and have better conversations, more sophisticated conversations with those other pieces of the chain. We were able to, because we're an industry group, not just a general recycler, we were able to have those contacts and industry knowledge to reach out to people and get them to the table, ask some candid questions, and really kind of get some internal work done. And some of the key lessons learned, I think these are applicable to any industry. One, at least in our case, the product designers were hungry for recycling information. They wanted to design a better mattress. They just didn't have access to the information. So just bringing them the challenges that the recyclers and the disassemblers were facing was huge. And they were looking for it. We didn't have to sell it. They already wanted it. The second big lesson learned is that the suppliers want to compete, the suppliers of materials to the mattress manufacturers want to compete on offering solutions for hard to recycle issues. They want to be able to go and say, choose me as your supplier because I'm going to help you with your hard to recycle issues. And then the last piece is that that internal communication collaboration within the MRC and having the different internal people who are working on different pieces of the value chain talk to each other and work together really maximizes that spread of learning so that we can, the work we're doing on recycling can help the work we're doing on manufacturing. The work we're doing with Next Life can help design, et cetera. So like that internal discussion was crucial for us really getting our arms around the entire value chain. Next. And then hot off the presses is what we just finished. And it's looking at recycling and the post-consumer phase of things and saying, okay, so we're driving trucks, we're burning diesel, we have an environmental impact. Is it a net benefit? And so we did a life cycle analysis, and like Rachel was saying, you know, there's a whole process of doing an LCA, and we wanted to compare all of the impacts that we were creating from collection, transportation, processing. One, see what opportunities there are to reduce them, but then compare it to creating virgin materials for the products for Next Life. And what are we displacing by providing recycled materials instead of virgin materials? The good news is, and the kind of the sigh of relief moment, is that the LCA was very clear that there are significant reductions in carbon, greenhouse gases, energy, water, and air pollution from those activities. So yes, we are burning diesel to drive trucks, but it's far better than creating virgin materials for the next products. So the full report's available online. It's freely shareable. It's in great detail, and hopefully it can provide a nice model and provide detail so that when the designers are trying to do their LCAs, they can have something industry specific for the post-consumer phase and not just have to use generic LCA libraries. Next. So that's it for me. I'm going to turn back over to Stephanie, and you can tell us how you want to manage the last couple of minutes.
Great. Thank you, Martis, Rachel, and Ryan. It is so exciting that, excuse me, we are having this discussion of redesign. And I think, you know, where we're at right now is people get the recycling, they even get source separation, but everybody is moving towards these upper R's. And we need to get these discussions going. And that is real, the big impact is going to happen. And so I'm just going to close before our next speaker comes on, our keynote, and I would just welcome the opportunity. We'll start with Martis and then Rachel and then Ryan with any closing comments, and especially your requests from this community. What do we need to do to fully support the work that you're doing, and what are the, you know, 1 or 2 simple actions that they can take to make this happen? So Martis, we'll start with you.
Stephanie, I think the obvious is let's all go to conferences like this to broaden our knowledge and grow our community so we can help each other. Another thing might be that in sort of the way Paul Hawken looks at it in Project Drawdown, if you don't know it, check it out, projectdrawdown.org, I believe. It's not a single solution. It's a multitude of solutions to change the path we're on to a better path. So educate and make positive change. Thank you.
Great. Rachel?
Yes, thanks for the introduction, and thanks to both of you two for your presentations. I thought they were really nice and complemented each other very well with mine in the mix. I had the same thought as Martis, actually, just connecting with each other, especially because I'm here in the Netherlands, for example. I'm guessing no one heard of this research before, but it's out there. And I'm guessing you have some solutions or ideas or something that I've never heard of. So there's so much knowledge, it's just a matter of putting it together. And I think by doing that, we can really amplify yeah, our power to increase zero waste or circularity progress. So yeah, you also have my email, my LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect. Maybe we can work together. Otherwise, yeah, just keep spreading the word. It's really great.
Awesome, and totally agree, Rachel. And Ryan, I'll let you bring it home.
Great. So I think the theme that really ran through all three of our discussions is the importance of taking technical knowledge that we all have in the zero waste movement, in the material handling industry, in the design industry, and bringing it to non-experts. And I think what we found with our work, and I think what Martis is doing with his material wall, and Rachel is doing with her flow chart, is to say, like, we know you want to make a difference, designer, and we also know that this isn't your core expertise. So here's how we can translate all this stuff into plain English, pick up this material and feel it, follow your line along the flow chart, and like we have to get out of our industry when we're bringing this information to them, speak in plain English, help them understand without becoming an expert. So I think those sorts of techniques and making it real and tangible are going to be crucial for actually changing minds outside of the people who have already changed their mind.
Terrific, and completely agree. We have to uplift everybody and reach out to all those different communities. And you know, public education or education in general is key, as Rachel has showcased. Is getting into our schools and into the trade schools and into, you know, high schools. You know, students are looking for those career opportunities. And our industry is a little nebulous as far as, you know, what's the career path. As you've seen from these three brilliant people, they all come from different backgrounds. So really engaging and reaching out, and utilize Zero Waste USA and True. You know, True works globally around the world, and we would welcome the opportunity to get you connected with any of our communities, to host webinars, to create this network. And of course, we have the Zero Waste International Alliance, who's been working for over 30 years and connecting people globally. So we are recording this entire conference. People are asking about the slides and everything. We'll send out a follow-up on that. If you had questions that you put in the chat, we will be looking through those and making sure the speakers will all be getting those. So a huge thank you, not only to our speakers for their incredible presentations, but the work that they are doing and the work that they will continue to do. So Martis, Rachel, and Ryan, thank you so much for your time and your generosity and sharing your expertise. With
Thanks,
that,
Stephanie.
thank you. We are going to introduce our keynote. And I've had the pleasure of working with Terry McDonald. I think we met probably 15 years ago when Earth Resource Foundation was doing our Zero Waste Business conferences. And so Terry has been a pioneer from way back in looking at materials and how to repurpose them. And it's such a pleasure to have him. And really, like, as we're talking about uplifting people, that is what Terry's organization does, and what he really helps us, what he's going to help us look at today. And if we want to next with his bio. And so it's not just about handling the materials, but so much of what we need to do is create this new workforce. And so Terry is the executive director of the St. Vincent de Paul Society in Lane County, and up in Oregon. And like I said, he's just been doing this incredible work for so many years and leading us all forward to not just putting it in the recycling bin, but thinking more creatively. So with that, I'd like to welcome Terry and bring his presentation up. So Terry, you're up. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your knowledge.
Well, Stephanie, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm trying to figure out how to get there.
Right on the bottom of your screen, Terry, is the Start Video button.
The Start Video button.
Right at the bottom.
Great. And if you want to go ahead and bring up Terry's presentation.
So next slide, Rose.
It's already up.
There you go.
Great.
Something's happening. That's not it. Well, regardless of how it goes, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Of course, in Eugene right now, it's a little bit rainy, but then that's what it normally is in Oregon. As you can see from the screen there, what St. Vincent de Paul does, of course, is generally a thrift industry. And we've been on the thrift industry forever. And what that does, of course, is allows you to actually peek into what the waste stream or the circular economy really is about. And to a large degree, that's what we do. So the result is that we have a lot of things that comes out of the waste stream, that things that people donate to St. Vincent de Paul because we have our stores and operations that really are not going to go back into the retail setting. And as a result of that, you have to figure out what you're going to do with it. And as you can see, everything from used candles to steel and brass and foam and window glass and everything else are things that come into the waste stream that we go ahead and deal with. The result is that we have to figure out how we're going to deal with those products and get them into some kind of recycled world, but also to find a way to create new products out of those. And that's really what we've been doing for a number of years. As Ryan was talking about with the mattress recycling, mattress recycling is one thing, but can you also rebuild mattresses, or you can repurpose things out of mattresses? And if you look at the next slide that we have, you'll see two little puppies sitting there on their beds. One of the things that we do with the contents out of reused mattresses is we create a line of pet beds, dog bed. Those pet beds are very high quality because they're taking basically the same components that come out of a mattress that the person slept on, taking those usable materials out of it and repurposing them for a pet bed, which gives us a very nice value-added product out of something that would normally just be a totally waste. And as a result of that is what we've learned is that kind of activity can actually give you a substantial amount of value-added product. And that's where the waste stream has been really an education for us. And likewise, understanding how to pit the mattress or the products out of the waste stream and pair them up with what the waste stream actually, the mattress or the waste stream operators want to have done, because most waste stream operators want to have product out of there. They don't really want to put them in the ground. If they get paid to take it and then they don't have to put it in the ground or up a chimney, it actually makes more money for them. And so we've been making an alliance with waste stream operators for years to pull products out of their waste streams. One of them that has been most productive of late, of course, is books. So you probably recognize that because we live in a digital world, obviously there's a lot of books that are being discarded by libraries around the world as people do more and more online stuff. And to be honest with you, libraries have to purge their books on a regular basis. They have to do that because there's a lot of books that are always being produced, but you only have so much shelf space. And so what the libraries are doing more and more is digitalizing the older books that they have that are not checked out frequently, and then discarding the actual paper product, which has allowed St. Vincent de Paul to work with those libraries around the United States and actually even into Europe to pull the product that they would have normally just sent out for pulp and divert them into our retail operations. On any given month, St. Vincent de Paul is processing about 80 to 100,000 pounds of books that we get from various sources around, and which has allowed us to create a very robust online sales for our books. We carry about 150,000 books in our online book department, as well as media. And one of the things you think of is, well, you can't really make money on media anymore because everybody's got their iPod or whatever it is. And the result of that is that there's just not a lot of money in that industry anymore. Well, the truth is there is. And so at any given day, our online media department will generate anywhere between $1,500 and $2,000 worth of generated sales online of those CDs and DVDs that we get in through the waste stream. And it's just a way of taking something and getting it back into the marketplace as well as into our retail operations. But the upcycling is what's a really fun part of it. So in the thrift industry, we have lots of different commodities that we get that just simply are not reusable. And so if you think about it, what are you going to do with used candles? Used candles are, not particularly useful. They are things that are often just discarded. I hope you can still hear me. Hello.
We hear you okay, Terry.
Oh,
You're-
good. Thank you.
You're good.
Okay, good. Thank you. And those candles, of course, are just one of the things that we normally discard. Well, St. Lucie Paul has been specializing for a number of years in going ahead and taking those candles, melting them down, and then creating basically bricks of wax, wax that we put into a bread pan, melt it, or let it solidify, wrap it, and sell it back to the marketplace as craft wax. You would not think that that would be a very robust business. Having said that, since we are collecting from about 100 transfer sites and dumps in this region, we get about 2 to 3 tons of that type of non-usable wax per month, which we then go ahead and melt, convert back into this brick of wax, and then sell back to the marketplace at $5 a brick. Especially at this time of the year, we sell a lot of that product. And at generally about 200 to 250 blocks of wax per month, per week, which gives us another resource that would have been just waste, but turns it into a profit-making venture for us. And that's what we really try and do, is to find a way to sort of hone in on small niche markets that are actually going to give us a competitive competitive advantage in the marketplace. Another one, since we're in the retail thrift industry, all of the retail thrift industry is competing for product. And so I need people to think of St. Lucie Paul instead of my competitors in the marketplace to drop off their usable goods. One way to do that is to say we also recycle products that you would not normally recycle. And one that we're recycling a lot of right now is block styrofoam. Block styrofoam, as you know, takes up a lot of space in the waste stream, very, very light, but it's very, bulky. And as a result of that, most consumers want to have that block styrofoam that came out of their television screen box or their furniture box or whatever else. They like to have it recycled in some manner and form. Well, we make it convenient for the consumer to drop that product off to us at our drive-through donation areas. And so if they bring that block styrofoam into my drive-through donation area, I'll take it for free. They then, of course, want to say, oh, by the way, we'll drop off your other stuff, which is good business for St. Lucie Paul, but there's no money in that particular part of the venture. The real money is made when you work with companies that produce a lot of block styrofoam and don't want to pay to take it to the landfill. And so with those companies, we charge them a fee to basically take a Gaylord size sack, it's called a cap sack, of that material from them, from their processing plants or wherever where they're taking where they generate the block styrofoam, and then we go ahead and recycle that product. We recycle right now somewhere around 100 tons of block styrofoam per year, and that's increasing exponentially. One of the largest suppliers of clean block styrofoam is actually hospitals. Hospitals, because they have these cold boxes where they send, body parts around, things that have to be kept cold and shipped from place to place. These styrofoam boxes, if they place them in, that are cold boxes, they can't use them more than once. They can only be used once. So we get a substantial number of those out of the hospitals And likewise, manufacturers or retailers of furniture have a lot of block styrofoam that comes to us, and then we go ahead and process it using the same technology that everybody has out there, and which is basically either a densification process or the hot melt system. In our case, we use a hot melt. As a result of being able to produce that kind of volume, we have manufacturers of secondary products that actually want us to send their product to them. One in particular basically came to us here recently and said, by the way, when you go to Costco or you go to Target or you go to Walmart and buy a frame, that the frame is actually made out of polystyrene that you sent to us. So you can actually see a full return of your product from the waste stream back into a consumer product that's being sold off the shelves. You're also getting a premium. And that's the other part of all of this is that the greater the volume of product you have, the more likely you're going to be able to get the premium dollar for it. So as Ryan was talking about in the previous presentation about mattress recycling and where the secondary markets were, St. Vincent de Paul started recycling mattresses actually 22 years ago. And we were the first commercially viable mattress recycler in the United States. And one of the problem materials was the cotton that came out of mattresses because no one had any use for it. No one ever saved that material before. And as a result of that, we had no market for it. So it took us a while to get the manufacturers of other downstream products to accept it. But once we told them, look, we can provide you a container of this cotton material, clean, ready to use, once a month, then they were willing to retool in their industry to accept this product and then go ahead and use it in their manufacturing processes. But before that, since no one had actually done that, what happens is that no one had ever tooled up for it, so no one would accept it. So the consistency of volume, putting that product out that's clean and usable on the backside is one of the keys to this recycling-based industries. Same thing with appliances. St. Vincent de Paul early on recognized that it needed to go ahead and get into the degassing, the CFCs out of appliances. So that was when in the 1990s, the chlorofluorocarbons were banned. And we had to not produce them anymore, but also we needed to have them recycled out of the old machines. Well, that meant that there was a reason for us to go ahead and tool up to do that removal, because the machines that we could also have, some of which could be rebuilt, we were able to put those back into the marketplace. But the ones that we deconstructed and took the gas out of, we were actually able to do a fractional distillation to clean the used gas that came out. To put it back into the marketplace and sell it back for those residual units that needed that product on the backside, and do that at a substantial profit. So typically it costs us about $4 a pound to clean the gas. We were selling that gas out there for about $30 a pound. It was a very, very good business for a while. And of course, now that's changed and it's morphing again. So as the CFCs are no longer in appliances, and now they've actually started pulling out the HFCs, and now they're moving to a new system of what we're going to drive our appliances. We're now tooling up for the next generation of recycling. So anticipating where the market is going to go and providing a service to you, to the market, is one of the ways to make sure that you capture that part of the waste stream. So all of this just leads back to the idea that how are you going to create jobs and employment, especially for people with multiple barriers to employment, which is what St. Vincent de Paul does, is to take a look at the waste stream and say, how can we find a niche market into that waste stream that will give us a way to create jobs and employment. So for example, we know that mattress recycling is a not particularly desirable business in terms of high prestige or anything else. It's also it's a deconstruction process, basically using a box cutter to pull things apart and then bale up the commodities. Well, that's an ideal job for an ex-offender coming out of incarceration as a first step back into the marketplace. And it's especially nice because since there's so much moving equipment and everything around it, you really don't have the opportunity to have a lot of visitors. Let me just put it that way. So we find that people that are really difficult to place coming out of incarceration, especially those that are pedophiles, this is an ideal place for them to work because there's nobody around there that they can prey upon. And so it's actually a very, very good steps up for those populations. It's also tactile work. Tactile meaning, you don't need specialized skills to do this work, but you also have the opportunity to advance. So if you're a cutter and you do well on that, but you want to be a baler and you want to learn how to use the hydraulic presses, then we'll go ahead and train you for that. Or if you want to be a forklift driver after that, we'll train you for that. And if you want to go down to the box truck that actually pulls the product in, we'll train you for that. So the result is that it's not a dead end. All of these waste-based businesses lead one into the next, into the next, into the next. And as a result of that, we create real opportunities for people to advance, even though they may have specifically difficult paths that they have to overcome. As it's my lead supervisor that actually runs our mattress deconstruction operation here in Eugene is an ex-offender that came out of incarceration a number of years ago for manslaughter. He now runs that entire division of my operation. So you can actually promote people up from their difficult life situations into leadership roles that actually will make it possible for them to succeed in the long term. And that's really what it's all about, is empowerment, and as well as creating that circular economy of employment, job training, and diversion from the waste stream and value-added products. So we've been doing that with all kinds of products. And the latest thing that we're working on right now is a process by which we're going to take the scrap silver and gold that we get in of our operation, which is a fair amount of that material comes in, but it's not reusable as jewelry. And we're going to smelt that down and recast it as new jewelry in our jewelry manufacturing division. And that's a product that we're just developing right now, is that process of taking that scrap, melting it, putting it back out in the marketplace. You would not think that that's a lot of material, because obviously scrap gold and silver seems like it should be very valuable, but we get about 1 to 2 pounds of gold per week through our various operations that is scrap and can't be put back into the jewelry market. And normally what we do is we just go ahead and put that product out into the scrap market, but I would rather recast it as a value-added product. And we have that ability to do that because of the molds associated with our glass factory. So our glass factory, Aurora Glass, has molds that we use to cast items in the glass that are decorative. Well, of course, those decorative objects, of course, are being cast on those graphite molds. Graphite molds are also what you use in the jewelry industry. So we're actually able to take molds back and forth from the various parts of the organization to go ahead and create a new product line that didn't actually cost us any money to tool up for. So that kind of creativity and the opportunity to take advantage of niches in the marketplace really is important. And all I can say about all of this is that if you get into this pathway of looking at the waste stream as an asset, as a place where there is money to be made, and if you work with your partners in the solid waste districts and to the landfill operators, all of us are actually interested in the same thing. We all want to create a way to make a living, make a profit, but also to divert stuff from the waste stream that can come up with a new use. And working with those districts really has been a very key component of what St. Vincent de Paul does. Well, if we move to the next slide, you can see some of what that's all about for us. And that is, of course, it creates an enormous amount of opportunity for St. Vincent de Paul to fulfill its mission. And that, of course, is to help low-income people. And by using the metrics that we have, we know how much materials we've saved, but we also know how much impact we've had in our communities. And by impact in our communities, St. Vincent de Paul, employs about 700 people, but also helps about 40,000 people per year in a variety of life situations, and mostly having to do with people that are homeless. So at any given night, we're housing about 500 to 600 homeless individuals. We have about 1,600 units of affordable housing that we help try and put those people into as they move out of homelessness out into community. when we have bad winter events or fires out here in this part of the world, we're able to take the resources that came out of the waste stream and actually get the blankets and the bedrolls and the shoes and everything else that people need in emergency situations and pull it right out of the supply of the products. All of this would not happen unless we had control of a substantial amount of what the waste stream generates. It's not a liability. The waste stream is a real asset. And if there's any message I can get to you is you should probably spend some time at the dump or the transfer site in your community. Because at the end of the day, that's where the real resources are. And so finding a way to discipline that material, get it into reuse in one form or another, or else upcycle it into new products, you will find a way to create a better world for all of us, all based upon the circular economy. And there you have it.
Great, Terry. Thanks so much. You're getting lots of applause for the work that you are doing. So I think there was a lot of chat, of course, your website, how people can get involved. And also if you could talk a little bit about how this work is spreading. So, you know, St. Vincent de Paul has facilities all over the country. How are you working with the other thrift shops, Salvation Army, Goodwill? Is there a community around that? And I think all of us want to know where to buy the candle wax and how we can start our own wax recycling business. So if you could share a little bit more about how that community, the thrift community, is working.
Sure, Stephanie.
And how we can.
I appreciate that, Stephanie. If you take a look at my final slide or the next slide over, I think it's the next one or the next one after that. We've created a grouping called the Cascade Alliance. And that's a group of nonprofits around the United States, not just St. Vincent de Paul's, but any nonprofit that wants to do waste-based business development. That industry, that trade group, the Cascade Alliance, works among itself to bring the best practices with waste-based business development. So whether it's in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where Adrian Wells' operation, the Greater Bridgeport Community Development Corporation, does mattress recycling, or the mustard seed in Florida that is now moving into retail thrift, or any of the other groups that we work with, we mentor those groups and work with them to develop waste-based businesses, and it could be everything from the car lot to retail thrift to mattress recycling or whatever else. We also share the best practices. So if anybody is interested in participating with the Cascade Alliance, just get a hold of us at St. Vincent de Paul, svdp.us. And we'll be happy to see if we can help you mentor into more waste-based businesses.
Terrific. And I think if we can pull up his last slide, it'll show that. Yeah. And I think that the next direction, one more. Great. And if we can leave that up so everybody can look at that. Terry, you talked a lot about working with incarcerated people. And what are the hurdles for that? Because I think, St. Vincent de Paul, Goodwill, Salvation Army, you have some really great tools in place, but how can, our businesses in our cities leverage that? And I would say not only the incarcerated, but those that are mentally or physically challenged, and accommodating those. And I think you have a good work model. And, what is that employment track?
Well, sure. So there are you asked multiple questions in there. Incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, or refugees that have multiple barriers to employment, meaning they have no either history or they don't speak English very well. That kind of tactile manufacturing type of operations like mattress recycling or the glass factory, some of the other activities are actually pretty ideal for that, because you don't have to come in with any skills and you don't even need to speak English. In our facility for mattress recycling in Woodland, California, there are 13 different languages being spoken at any time on the floor. Wow. And so, again, small, easy, tactile manufacturing type of operations or deconstruction in this particular case is an ideal workplace. In the thrift industry, people with metal barriers, high performing DD, that particular population works very well in support areas associated with the thrift industry. So whether, you know, and again, that's what you see with Salvation Army or Goodwill or whatever, is that you can have simplified tasks associated with that processing, like hanging garments that go into the retail operations, and those kinds of easy, repetitive tasks that do not require any specialized skills are one way to cast away to help those people. We also found an interesting new program, and that is that since we have so much affordable housing, we have a need to have that a lot of rebuilding of sheds and so forth associated with our mobile home parks. We're having our area high schools manufacture those sheds for us in their vocational training programs, especially in rural Oregon, where their dropout rate is very high. And keeping kids in the craft programs like the wood shop is one way to keep them engaged, but also give them a skill as they go forward. There's lots of ways to do this, but we're running out of time.
Great. Terry, amazing as always. I encourage all of you to go to the website first and then get involved in your local community. I think we've really put a burden on a lot of our thrift shops, and because most of them, like Terry's nonprofit, are doing so much more, and their thrift shops are important in the recycling, but the work that they're doing with people is what's most important. So really supporting them. Don't give them your junk, give them something that is useful. Also, when we talk about diversity and equity, thank you for the work that you're doing. 13 different languages, that's unbelievable. And just the diverse workforce and supporting our young people. Thank you again, Terry. It's always an honor to work with you and have you speak at our conferences.
My pleasure, thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, everybody. Keep the chat going, keep sharing. We will either get to answer all your questions and comments or get those answered throughout the rest of the day. Now it is with my great pleasure to introduce my co-host, Chris DeTournay-Burkham. Chris actually works for Zero Waste USA, but she has an amazing background, and she's just a huge champion for zero waste, and is working with college students, working with her local community, and she's going to bring up our next plenary panel, The Future is Now, Zero Waste Food Service. Chris, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. So yeah, we have a wonderful session ahead, and thank you, Stephanie, for that nice intro. So we're moving into our second plenary this morning. The Future is Now, Zero Waste Food Service. And so it's a great panel with three amazing people all trying to tackle reduction of waste in our food service sector. And I would love to get the point where we don't say waste and it's all resource, but right now there's a huge amount of waste in food service. We are certainly trying to figure out how to make that not happen in California, at least through policy, major law, SB 1383, looking at recovery of food waste. So we'll be talking about all of that. So we have an hour. After the presentations, we'll move into a brief Q&A period. Feel free to put questions in the chat. We're going to work to answer what we can in the chat and do the best we can to address others verbally in the Q&A if we have time. So I'm Chris DeTournay. Yes, I work with Zero Waste USA and one of the main organizers of the conference, along with Stephanie and True and the U.S. Green Building Council. And I'm a Bay Area-based zero waste consultant and educator, and I'm also the chair of Zero Waste Commission for the city of Berkeley. So to introduce our panel, and please know that we do have bio slides, and the bios are also on the website, so feel free to reference those if we move too quickly, and as is the LinkedIn information. So we have Jamie Rhodes is going to go up first, and Jamie is the policy consultant for Upstream and has worked with them a long time and is also an attorney and brings a huge amount of expertise to his work with Upstream, which is working to make reuse the future. And next we'll have Jackie Suggett, and she's the Director of Capital, Innovation, and Engagement at ReFed, which has been doing amazing work in working across different networks and sectors to reduce and recover wasted food. And then followed at the end by Evelyn Ferreira, who's the Zero Waste and Compliance Lead for the San Francisco International Airport, which I hear has over 100 food service places in the complex. So an amazing amount of work to be done there. And so I think we're going to just move straight into Jamie.
All right. All right, I think everyone can hear me now. Thank you everyone for the opportunity to speak to you today. The topic that I'm presenting on here is a program that Upstream is working to launch next year called Chart Reuse. So today I'm going to go a little bit through that, what we're up to, what we're trying to accomplish with it, and then just a little bit of a snapshot into the program itself. So if we go to next slide here. So just a little bit reminder of who Upstream is. I imagine that many of you here have intersected with our organization before, but we're a national nonprofit organization whose entire focus right now is to make throwaway go away. So there's three key areas that we work to engage in. One is the business innovation side of it, which Chart Reuse is part of that effort. We also seek to do the social impact work of communicating about reuse, refill, as well as zero waste efforts, and making it the cultural norm. That many of our policies have to be based off of what our society's culture is, and we want to make sure that reuse and refill are part of that cultural narrative. And there's also the policy change effort, is that as we continue to move forward, we need to make sure that policy floor comes up right behind us and that we don't see backtracking on good efforts, and that good successful pilots get really incorporated into policies that support that across the board. So go to the next slide. So for those of you that aren't familiar, you can check out our website, upstreamsolutions.org. Excuse me. If you want to see more of the full suite of programs and efforts that we're currently undertaking, I did want to give a little bit of a snapshot of some of the resources that we do have available on our website. So we facilitate the Reuse Coalition Leadership Network, which is organizations and reuse coalitions across the country that get to come together to workshop concepts, build out policy tools, and to continue the dialogue about how we work together to build reuse and refill. We also have a business directory to demonstrate how many different reuse refill businesses across the country are already in operations. We've got a policy tracker that seeks to try to capture as much of the reuse refill policy as it's being implemented. We do further policy development work, and then we also have our indisposable podcast that you can subscribe to, and we regularly host live streams where we're able to dive deeper into these topics. So if you go to the next slide. So within the business innovation side of our organization, this is what we're trying to accomplish. We want to accelerate the shift to reusable items and more circular economy. Food service industry is a big source of the litter, and this is why it's an area where we've really focused on. And we want to have comprehensive solutions. It's not just a one-shot flash in the pan, maybe this will work here, but to have insight about what's happening across the country and across the world, and to bring best practices and learning to the organizations that are on the ground doing this work in their local communities. And in the end, it's about the benefits to both the environment from better management of our resources, if I dare to say, reducing our waste. But it also showed that reuse and refill as a business policy is actually good for their bottom line. It's good for their marketing to consumers. And it's also good for reducing costs. So to go to the next slide. So the real focus of the Chart Reuse is to deliver on this vision. We want to see that all restaurants are serving us on real plates, cutlery, cups. That's the vision. And in order to reach that long-term vision, we need to start working backwards. What's not in place? What's missing? What, if it were there, would make all the difference in the world for us to achieve this vision? So go to the next slide. And this is where we came up with Chart Reuse. So Chart Reuse it's designed to be a piece of software that's going to hopefully help, that's intended to help move move food service industry from the current position where it's at now to a future that involves reuse and refill. So it's about data, tracking and analyzing data. It's using that data to help make decisions on the ground and to share information across the board. Have an analytics portal, measure what the impact of the decisions that we make are, provide coaching, have those that have knowledge of this and be able to share that information. Develop new metrics for sustainability and to expand both what we're tracking and how we're measuring our successes in our work. And then it's all about communication, that as we make decisions about transitioning from throwaway to reuse, we want to communicate what we're doing both to other businesses, but also directly to customers to say this is up, that this is what's happening. So with all that as a preface, if we go to the next slide, let's go into chart reuse itself. So the first thing, the slides after this are going to be snapshots of a demonstration project within chart reuse. But what I wanted to start this with is what sort of information is necessary for a good project for chart reuse and for the software to deliver on its promise. The first, and this is just a quick snapshot. We have this data, we're going to be able to track the impact of a switch from throwaway to reuse and refill. So we go to the next slide here. So the first thing, the place where it starts is that in order for us to make change, we have to know what's real. Where are we right now in reality? And so that's setting a baseline. And the intention here is for a user of the software to go through, whether it's an inventory or whatever records it keeps of what are the single-use items that it's currently utilizing. What's that baseline? What's the case cost of it? How many units are in a case? And then we also want to set that standard of where are we now? And then the next piece is to think at some point in the future, is this a 6-month effort, a 9-month effort, a 12-month effort? Where are we going to be when we make the transition away from single use into reusables? And to forecast, are we phasing these out? Are we reducing it by 75%? How far are we going to have a picture of what that location is going to look like in that new economy? And to then put the numbers down. Okay, so if we're not phasing it out completely, what does it mean for us to keep 10% of our single-use stock there? What's the cost associated with this? And we're able to look at that change, what that impact is here from that baseline to that forecast. If you go to the next slide, the next piece is that we need to track what is replacing, what is coming in place instead of the single-use disposables. So we want to go down that line again. Within the demonstrations that I have up here, we're looking at just a couple beverage items and foodware items. But the idea is that it goes down the line, whether it's beverages, foodware, cutlery, napkins. The idea is to try to capture both on the single use and what are we replacing it with. And then that is broken down into initially, what do we need now in order to make this transition happen? And then annually, how much are we going to have to repurchase? Is this something that needs 20% repurchase rate because of breakage, loss, theft, what have you? We know reusables have a way of growing legs and walking away. And we want to make sure that we're accurately capturing what that repurchase count is going to be. If you go to the next slide. And then the next piece of it is to look at what are the additional costs that are associated with us making this transition. We know it's just not a like for like. You know, you get rid of single-use forks and you bring in some cutlery and then boom, bang, we're done. Well, what if there's a labor cost associated with this? We need more janitorial staff, or we need collection staff, or we need cleaning staff, dishwashing staff. If that's the case, we want to make sure that we add in the additional labor costs so we know what happens when we make this decision to transition. We also want to look at dishwashing costs. Are we adding a new dishwasher? Are we running a dishwasher more often? What's the carbon emissions impact of that? What's the water usage impact of it? What's the cost use of it? And then we go down the line from labor to dishwashing to labor, dishwashing, waste hauling, and other capital expenditures. And I mean to get down to the nitty gritty, like getting rid of single-use salt packets and moving to salt shakers. We want to make sure we incorporate the cost of buying those salt shakers. And so we want to get that full picture of the transition from that single use to a reusable. If we go to the next slide here, and then once we're able to do the input work, if there's a little bit of time associated, a little bit of elbow grease of doing data entry, as with all good data software has that requirement, we're able to look at the impact of what this transition is going to look like, what the transition is going to accomplish. Right here is the broad scope of what we're measuring. We're looking at cost savings. We're looking at reduction in single-use items that are being purchased. We're looking at waste reductions, and we're looking at greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And we want to be able to compile that so you can say right now that if I were to say get rid of 100% of my cold cups and replace them all with glass tumblers. You can see here, this is our expected cost savings, our reduction in waste, and our greenhouse gas emissions. And you can say that's where we're going to be at in the future. Now, what the software then allows us to do is to track progress along the way. So we have our initial baseline, then we have a future goal. Where are we at in the process? And so we're able to vet whether our forecast becomes reality or not. If we go to the next slide, one other way that we look at measuring the impact of this is that whether cost, waste, or greenhouse gas emissions, we want to be able to cross-reference that with the products that are being phased out, the category, are these beverage items, are these food service items, is it cutlery, and to be able to go down the line of the progress we're making within each category. And there's also the material type. Is the goal to phase out all plastic, or do we want to move away from cardboard? I try not to make a judgment of what somebody's transition is going to be or what they're seeking to accomplish. The goal of the tool is that whatever that vision is that you have, we're going to be able to track the impact of that work. And so these are just some of the ways that we're able to track that on an individual project-specific basis. So that's chart reuse in a nutshell. It's not the most complicated piece. It really is about having a vision of where am I going to be at some future date, and then let's start tracking what the impact of that transition is going to be. So if you go to the next slide here, yeah, the way that right now we're in beta testing, we've been working on this software for about 1.5 years, and we have a number of test projects that we're running currently. And what we're looking to, we are still taking on some beta users to help us test the software, work through the bugs that are there. And then we expect to go live with this available to the public in 2023 in a series of stages, both a soft launch so that we're controlling and managing the uptake of this into it going fully live right now our intention is mid next year. So you've got my email there. Also my partner, Cerise Bridges, who's our customer success manager at Chart Reuse. We're available if you want to talk to us to do further deeper dive into a demonstration of it, or if you're interested in trying to use it for how you see it impacting your work now. And that's one thing that I want everyone to walk away with this, is that we built a piece of software. We have an intention of how we would use it by helping individual restaurants make this transition. But I also know that when you put a good tool in the hands of effective organizers and staff, the ways in which it can be used to be helpful towards your mission might be something we never thought of. So feel free to get in touch with us and say, I've got an interesting idea about how we could use this to be successful. We would love to hear it. And with that, I'll hold off and move on, and I look forward to answering any questions in the future.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's jump in, Jackie.
Sure, great. Hope everyone can hear me okay. Thanks, Jamie, for a great presentation. I'm going to be shifting gears a little bit and talking about food waste, and then Evelyn will bring it all together for us to round out the panel here at the end. But just for those who are not familiar with ReFed, we are a nonprofit in the US focused on food waste reduction across the entire food system. We primarily do that by analyzing and disseminating data, bringing catalytic capital into the food waste space, and then convening the very large tent that is the food system to come together and work on this issue. So we can go to the next slide. For our time today, I'm going to kind of break this up into 3 chunks. We're going to start with a really quick overview of food loss and waste and some of the impacts economically, environmentally, and socially of that waste. Then I'll talk through some solutions and resources that we have available for you. And then at the end, I want to talk about the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment, which is a specific example of bringing all this together into action. Data is only as valuable as the action that it leads to in many cases, and so I want to make sure that we round out with that at the end. You can go to the next slide. So these are some numbers that some of you may be familiar with, but these are global, not US. Food waste doesn't know boundaries, so I wanted to start with the macro picture here. 1/3 of all food produced goes to waste. That's closer to 35% in the US, according to 2019 data. $1 trillion with a T in value. I can't even comprehend that number, but we're talking about a massive economic opportunity. And then finally, 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And we'll talk more about the US context of that here in a minute. You can go to the next slide. And food waste truly is a systemic issue. We really can't put blame or responsibility on any isolated part of the supply chain. It is end to end. As you can see here, we're talking specifically about food service today. That falls under the consumer-facing business segment there. That, in conjunction with consumers themselves, accounts for well over half of where we see waste happening in the supply chain. As we start talking about environmental and financial impacts, the further it gets down the supply chain, the larger those impacts are. So it's really important to be thinking about prevention upstream when we talk about food waste. Next slide. So I wanted to kind of double click into food service specifically. I realize these are not very large font, but this is screenshots from our online tool. So this is something you can go in and toggle around and play with and interact with and adjust as you want. But this is looking at food waste in food service. Food service compared to other consumer-facing businesses is a very diverse sector with different formats and structures. And so the first chart on the left is just showing where in those different formats and structures waste is happening. The charts on the right look at both the cause of that waste and then the destination of that waste. It is worth noting that a lot of it is going to destinations that are lower on the valorization chart. There's a hierarchy of where we want to see this food waste go, and those destinations are at the bottom. And so wanting to see that move further up. This is not unique to food service. This is something we definitely see in other consumer-facing businesses as well, but wanted to ground us in some of that data. And you can go to the next slide. Let's talk about some impacts. So we'll start with the economic impacts. You saw that 1 trillion number globally. In the US, we're talking about 408 billion for all surplus food. That's all food that goes uneaten or unsold. About 70% of that is what we at Re-Fed would define as food waste. We could have an entire segment talking about the different definitions of food waste, so I won't go into that, but it's about 2% of US GDP. Consumer-facing businesses and consumer homes are feeling a lot of the brunt of that cost. And it's obviously only getting worse as we see inflation and food prices going up as well. Next slide. Then if we look at the environmental impacts of food waste in the US specific, and I just want to point out, this is just for food that is wasted. This is not all food production. So we're looking at 4% of our US greenhouse gas emissions. This is where the conversation with methane becomes really important, and just the intersections between food production and methane. 14% of freshwater use, 18% of cropland use. This is where biodiversity enters the conversation as well as being related to food waste. And then finally, 1/4 of our landfill inputs. It's the #1 material going into our landfills according to the EPA. And again, we could talk a lot about methane on the landfill side too. So next slide. Last on the impacts is public health, hunger and food security. My background is actually in public health. This is how I came to food waste as a topic, was learning that we have anywhere from 1 in 8 to 1 in 10 Americans being food insecure, and then also wasting 35% of our food. And just the reality that we live in where both of those can exist. So it's certainly not a one-to-one match, 1 meal saved, 1 meal served. It's a lot of complicated underlying factors, but I think it does highlight just some of the inefficiencies in our food system and in our supply chains if both of those realities can exist. So next slide. This is not meant to be a doom and gloom presentation, so I will transition now hopefully to the happier portion, which is what do we do about this? So some of the solutions that we have and some of the resources that are available in order to facilitate the reduction of food loss and waste. So you can go to the next slide. Almost 2 years ago now, Re-Fed published the Roadmap to 2030 and the Insights Engine. The Roadmap to 2030 is a document that basically is our call to action. What are the 7, we call them action areas, that players can take across the food system in order to meet our 2030 goal to reduce food waste by 50%. The Insights Engine, which I'll talk more about in a minute, is kind of the data hub beneath it. All the numbers and analyses in the roadmap are fueled by the Insights Engine. So there are 7 key action areas here. You will notice it is very prevention heavy. This is intentional. I think we generally know what it means to rescue food, what it means to recycle food. But we emphasize prevention a lot, and we say you need to prevent more, but we don't always know what we mean by that. So we wanted to clarify a bit what we meant by preventing food waste, excuse me. The other thing I'll say here is that each of these action areas together encompass a next layer of detail, which is about 40 different modeled solutions that get very specific of what do you actually do to refine product management, for example. We've modeled these out financially, environmentally, and socially as far as their costs and impacts. And that's, again, we'll talk about that in the Insights Engine here in a second. But to very briefly go through what these mean, optimizing the harvest is all about avoiding overproduction and then just harvesting as much as possible. Enhancing product distribution is about leveraging technology to efficiently move products and extend freshness and shelf life. Refined product management is about aligning purchases with sales as closely as possible or finding secondary outlets for food. Maximize product utilization. This is about designing our facilities, menus, operations, etc., to use as much food as possible. This is also where we talk about upcycling of food. Reshaping consumer environments. The language there is very intentional. We don't just want to educate consumers and then put all the responsibility on them to change behavior. We actually want to change the environments where they shop, cook, and eat to make it hard for them to waste food. Moving on to food rescue, strengthening food rescue. We have a very robust food rescue system in the US. This is about further strengthening that by overcoming bottlenecks and communication challenges. And then finally, recycle anything remaining. We want to find the highest and best use for anything that's left to capture the residual value. We can go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, each of those 7 have about 40 different in total modeled solutions that fall under them. We can also categorize those solutions by sector. So this is looking at the top solutions if we were focused on tonnage of food waste reduced in food service. You can see some of the toggles at the top. You can change this list based on the metrics or the sector that you care about. But this just gives you an example of what some of those specific solutions would be that may fall under some of those action areas. And the roadmap also outlines actions that we recommend people take in addition to implementing these solutions to support their success. So you can see things like actual solutions implementation, like discouraging plate waste, redesigning menus. You can also see some partnership focused actions around building relationships for food donation. Some of these will also have capital lenses to them. Obviously, it takes money to do this. So this is a snapshot. There are links in this deck when it gets sent out. You can go directly into the tool and play around with and look at these a little bit more closely. On the next slide, this is where I want to highlight the Insights engine. So the Insights engine is the geek out data hub that really provides all of the data that goes into the roadmap. And this is an interactive tool. It's online, it's free. All of our methodologies are public. So you can see how we get to the numbers that are there. But there are 6 tools in the Insights engine. I don't have time to show them all to you, but just kind of very quickly describe what they do if it's of interest. The first is called the Food Waste Monitor. It allows you to understand the problem, how much food is wasted, where is it wasted, why is it wasted, where is it going, etc. Those kind of soccer ball looking charts I had earlier on food service, that is from the Food Waste Monitor. The second is the Solutions Database. This is where you can look at those 40 plus different solutions and more as we model them, get really detailed analytics on what does it cost to implement, where does that capital need to come from, what stakeholders need to be involved, what are the environmental, economic, social impacts if I did implement them, etc. The third is the Solution Provider Directory. So this is to help you look regionally for players that help to actually implement these solutions on the ground, companies and nonprofits. Fourth is the Impact Calculator. This lets you either input 1 or 2 comparative scenarios of where your food waste is going currently, and it shows the impacts of that or the changes that would be made. So we see this used a lot for business case development or communicating impact of various programs. Fifth is the Capital Tracker. This is the newest tool. It came out in May. It shows kind of the flow of capital into food waste, how much is needed, where is it going, what are the gaps, etc. And then finally, we also have a policy tracker that shows different state level and federal level policies of food waste that lets you compare policies across different states, etc. So again, this is linked. Highly encourage you, if this is of interest, to dive in and play around with the resources that are there. We're also always open to additional data sources to feed into it, of course, and feedback on additional use cases. Now I will transition into the final section just here in the final minutes. If you want to go to the next slide. As I mentioned at the beginning, data is great. We love data, but it really is only as valuable as the actions that it leads us to and how it can drive change at the end of the day. So I wanted to share an example of a partnership here in the US on the West Coast that is both facilitating the intake of data, but then really focused on taking that data and transitioning it into action. So you can go to the next slide. The Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment is a public-private partnership on the West Coast of the US. It includes California, Oregon, Washington, the province of British Columbia, and 9 or 10 different cities and counties across those states and provinces. They basically said, we want to have a regional goal to reduce food waste by 50% by 2030, and we want to work with food businesses to accomplish it. So Refed, along with our peers at WWF and RAP UK, are executing that project on their behalf and are working with food businesses to do so. It is a voluntary agreement model, much like Courtauld or others across the globe, where these signatories are signing on to be a part of this project with the jurisdictions. You can go to the next slide. This is a list of current signatories. You can see they span all sorts of food businesses, from producers to manufacturers to retailers, food service. You'll see Aramark, Compass, and Sodexo all represented here from a food service lens. We do have several hotels that also participate in some of our pilots that aren't listed here as formal signatories, but it's been really powerful to see how we can also facilitate collaboration between sectors. You know, hotels and retailers are buying from the same producers and manufacturers, and so how can we find some of those synergies and leverage those to have greater impact? So this partnership models the Target Measure Act framework that we use globally in a number of food waste initiatives. So this encompasses the target portion. This is where signatories are committing to and joining on the partnership. If we go to the next slide, I'll talk quickly about measurement. And as a data lover, I could spend the whole time on this, but I will breeze through it. We don't have any food service data yet. We're actually gathering that for the first time in 2023. So this is all retail data. We're about a year and a half ahead on the retail side. So this is more illustrative of what we'll be able to do with food service next year. This is also the next couple slides here. This is just the public facing data. We have a lot of uses in more depth of this data internally to the project, where we feed it into our pilot programs, and we do a lot of benchmarking and kind of custom roadmap development for our signatories proprietarily with their data as well. But on the public side, we can talk about unsold food rates by department. We can then extrapolate that from the market share that actually reports and estimate tonnages in the region of food waste. If we go to the next slide, we can also look at destinations of that food waste and have kind of waste rates, recycling rates, etc. There's a very large bucket here called unknown. I'm sure that is stirring some questions. For the sake of time, I won't go into it now, but more than happy to address it in the Q&A. But that is actually a very intentional part of our methodology. And then the last part of data, piece of data that we share, on the next slide, are the impacts. So again, we can, for our specific entities reporting or extrapolating that across the region, we can look at what the impacts of that wasted food are. So again, this is retail data. This was from 2019. We will be reporting through 2021 in retail this year, and then we will start in food service next year and hopefully have a very similar structure to that data. And the next slide, the last piece, Target Measure Act, is the act side. So what do we do with the data? Besides really pretty charts and graphs, which are motivating to show progress over time, we also are feeding this data back into the project. So we run a number of different pilot projects. We have 9 actively running this year with our signatories, anything from employee engagement programs to AI technology for ordering, et cetera. So they really do kind of run the gambit of different levels of technology and complexity. These are informed by the data, though. We look at where are the hotspots among our group of signatories, where are the opportunities to be reducing waste, and then what are the solutions from that insights engine tool I showed that fit into those areas of need. And we focus on those for our pilot projects. So that kind of rounds out the Target Measure Act framework, as well as my time. So I will wrap up there for now, and then more than happy to go into more detail in the Q&A. And with that, I will pass it on to Evelyn.
Great. Thanks so much. You're muted, Evelyn. Yeah, we're not able to hear you, Evelyn. I don't know if we can unmute you. There you. There we go. All right.
All right. Wonderful. Great. Well, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Zero Waste USA and partners for inviting SFO to be here today. In this presentation, I will share more details about SFO's zero waste food service programs and our plans to become a zero waste airport. More specifically, I will walk us through the airport's material management journey and share with you all where we are with our current programs, where we're going, and how we plan to get there. Next slide, please. SFO is a sustainability leader in aviation and for large campuses. The airport has set the goal to be the first airport in the world to achieve triple zero, meaning zero carbon, zero waste, and zero net energy. To achieve zero waste, we're aiming to reach an 80% diversion rate in next year in 2023, an increase from our current rate, which hovers around 65%. And not only are we aiming for zero waste, SFO has also set the goal to create a closed loop circular campus. Next slide. SFO has been on a waste reduction and waste diversion journey for over a decade. The airport has become internationally renowned for its flagship zero waste concessions program, the first of its kind implemented in an airport setting. In 2016, SFO set the zero waste strategic goal, and in 2017, the airport launched its food donation program, SFO Unites Against Hunger. 2 years later, we launched our zero waste concessions program, which prohibited PET plastic foodware and water bottles. And then 2 years later, in 2021, we expanded that policy, our PET ban, to include all beverages, not just water bottles. And now in 2023, we're implementing a fiber foodware requirement for our current 103 concessionaires, and we're preparing to launch a reusable foodware pilot in 2 of our food courts, with the goal of, by 2027, becoming a zero waste airport. Next slide. So SFO zero waste concessions programs, they not only look to reduce and prevent waste, but also improve waste sorting and ensure compliance with state laws, of which there are many. The following are the 7 program elements that we're implementing to make our way towards zero waste, which I'll discuss in more detail throughout this presentation. So the first is mandatory waste sorting. SFO collects and separates recyclables and organics throughout the airport, including terminal and back of house areas. Second is food recovery. We have set in place that food recovery program that I mentioned before. Third, we're also regulating accessories and condiment handouts in compliance with new California legislation, AB 1276, which I will describe in more detail. Fourth is SFO's flagship zero waste concessions program and our plastic-free foodware and beverage requirement. Let's see here. And fifth is SFO's newest zero waste initiative, the design and pilot and launch of our reusable dishware and foodware program. And number 6 and 7, to ensure compliance with state regulations and our own regulations here at the airport, we do have policy enforcement by way of annual compliance audits that are foundational to the success of our program and our relationship building with our concessionaires. And that also includes trainings and education. At SFO, we're starting to schedule bi-monthly zero waste trainings that are open to all employees, whether they're back of house, concessions managers, or SFO commission employees. We're also developing educational materials for everyone involved in the success of our zero waste and materials management programs. Next slide. So as a baseline, SFO must comply with state legislation, which is some of the most progressive in the country. SFO has a long history of sorting its waste in compliance with the City of San Francisco's mandatory recycling and composting ordinance, which was passed in 2009. And that does require composting and recycling services citywide. We also, commercial and residential composting and recycling are also statewide mandates that we must meet. And beginning in 2012, California set requirements for mandatory statewide commercial recycling, Assembly Bill 341. And most recently in 2016, the state passed legislation requiring gradual implementation of statewide commercial and residential composting, as well as food recovery services. As such, the airport has an obligation to collect and separate organics and recyclables, which we do throughout the airport. All of our waste bins are set up in trios, as you can see here in the picture, and our waste bins are also strategically placed to ensure that there's always a station within view. Next slide, please. Our second strategy is food recovery. The same state law that requires statewide composting also mandates food recovery services for all food generators in the state beginning January of 2024. Ahead of its time, in 2017, SFO launched its food recovery program, SFO Unites Against Hunger. And although the program was on and off during recent years due to the pandemic, we officially relaunched the program this March and it has been a resounding success. We've partnered with Replate, a food recovery organization that collects food 3 times per week from our food donation hubs located across the airport. We have 4 of those. Our tenants drop off unsold yet edible foods for distribution to nonprofit organizations that then provide those foods to communities in need. Within the first 7 months of the program's relaunch, 40% of food concessionaires have enrolled in the program, and we've recovered 4 tons of food, equivalent to 7,000 meals. We've also diverted 8 tons of CO2 and saved 2 million gallons of water through our food recovery efforts so far this year. Next slide, please. Our third program component is set by California Assembly Bill 1276, which highly regulates the distribution of foodware, accessories, and condiments with the aim of cutting back on unnecessary waste. This is a very detailed bill that we're working closely with our concessionaires to implement due to the significance of the changes to food service operations and counter setup. Highlights of the bill include single-use accessories and condiments must only be provided to the customer upon their request or the employee's offer. If no accessories or condiments are requested, none are provided. Bundling of accessories is also prohibited. All items must be given to the customer individually, one at a time. And the most notable change will impact self-service areas, where open containers and bins holding disposable accessories for consumers to grab and go are now prohibited statewide. Any open bins and accessories must be kept behind the counter, out of customer reach. If any condiments or accessories are made available to the customer, they must be in refillable bulk containers, such as a pump or bottle. Any of those items in the middle are approved. Next slide, please. Since 2019, foodware has had to meet the following criteria here at the airport. All of our foodware must be certified compostable or made entirely of natural fiber, clearly labeled compostable with green color coding, as you can see in that cup in that green square. All of our foodware also has to be fluorinated chemical free, which is also now state law. Although these requirements have worked very well for us for the last 3.5 years, and our concessionaires have implemented the requirements with an 83% compliance rate, like many jurisdictions across the country and here in California too, we found PLA, compostable bioplastics, to be problematic to our waste streams and very difficult for customers to sort. So to address that concern, in 2023, SFO will require fiber-based food packaging for food and beverages prepared on site. Implementing fiber-based packaging will be taken in phases, and more study and discussion is required to come to a longer-term solution for prepackaged grab-and-go foods, which are currently packaged in bioplastic. We're confident that requiring fiber-based foodware and accessories is the right next step to help reduce the use of PLA plastics in our terminals. And our advice to businesses and facilities looking to implement a plastic-free policy is this: skip compostable plastics if you can and opt for fiber-based products instead. Next slide, please. Implementing fiber foodware alone will not address another major concern that we and our waste hauler have, which is waste stream contamination. To address contamination of recycling and compost waste streams, it's important that we eliminate contaminants and any problematic materials, as you can see here on this slide. Problematic contaminants include plastic wrap, cellophane bags, soiled aluminum foil, plastic condiment packets, jam packets, butter packets, plastic ramekins, tape, twist ties, adhesives, and plastic produce stickers and labels, all the little things. And the substitutes that we recommend include freeing your fruit using butcher paper, all natural sandwich bags, paper-based condiment packets, which are typically used for sugar or spices, bulk condiments, fiber-based or reusable ramekins, twine, paper-based tape, and compostable stickers if absolutely necessary. Please note that we're just starting to evaluate these contamination reducing measures internally, and we make these as a recommendation, given that all natural and zero waste alternatives are readily available on the market. And we're hopeful that in prohibiting common contaminants, the quality of the airport's outgoing materials will improve and help us meet new state sorting requirements. Next slide, please. So it's no secret that the greatest opportunity to reach zero waste lies in waste reduction, and that reusables are the best way to make less waste. The airport is currently developing a reusable dishware program that will be piloted in 2 food court areas in 2023. We will build out the program's required infrastructure this upcoming year to pilot the program's logistics and operations over a period of 3 months, where we'll collect quantitative and qualitative data and partner with upstream to use chart reuse for data collection and analysis. The plan is to expand the program throughout the international terminals and continue launching reusables in a new terminal every 6 to 12 months as logistics allow. If we can keep to that cadence, we do project having reusables available airport-wide by 2027. Next slide, please. So how exactly do we go about preparing and planning for reusables? There are some key questions that any reusables program needs to identify, followed by a thorough assessment of infrastructure capacity, needs, demand, and desired impact. So I'll quickly run through these. The first is staffing. Who's going to run the service? Will it be the airport or your facility or a third party? Second, are participating concessionaires. Who is participating in this program? What are their current sales? And what items do they sell as well? Third is funding mechanism. How will the program be funded? Fourth, dishwashing infrastructure. Are there dishwashers on site? If so, where, of what capacity, and with what kind of utility hookups? Those are very important questions to ask early on. Fifth, choosing your reusable dishware and your reusable to-go foodware, 5 and 6. Next is our foodware bin collection system. So what is the best way to collect said dishes and containers? Those are all things to think about. And lastly, second to last, software for smart bins and or inventory tracking. A big question that we have been asking ourselves since the beginning is, what's the role of technology in a reuse system? How can we design a system that benefits from technology but doesn't necessarily depend on it to function? When we view these programs through an equity and accessibility lens, we see benefits to more analog systems that are definitely worth exploring. And lastly, signage and communications. As with any program requiring participation and behavior change, how will everyone easily understand how the system works and how to use it? Next slide, please. When designing a reusables program, we must observe and understand the user and how they're engaging with the dining area and the establishments. Does your facility provide ample tables and seating? Are establishments more grab and go? How far does a customer need to walk from the counter to their table and then to the nearest collection bin? There will be different solutions for different spaces, and it's important to recognize that at least in an airport or any transient setting, there will continue to be a need for disposables until systems are more robust, large scale, and ideally interconnected. Next slide, please. So SFO's large-scale vision for a zero-waste terminal goes beyond reusable dishware and foodware. To get us to that minimum 90% waste diversion rate, we will need to implement multiple strategies. These will likely include seeking zero-waste and low-waste retailers to set up shops at the airport. These could be retailers that provide zero-waste, that prioritize zero-waste operations and products such as bulk snacks, grocery items, and bath and body products. SFO can also work more closely with food and beverage concessionaires to transform back-of-house operations to be as low waste as possible, prioritizing refillable, reusable, and bulk back-of-house inventory. This could include reaching out to suppliers, requesting changes to shipment packaging, and eliminating single-use packaging for produce or local deliveries. The options are really endless. Next slide, please. Given that our programs are large in scale and involve many stakeholders, challenges of all types are to be expected. As a sustainability team, we found that in large part, our job is to do the research, understand the needs of all of our stakeholders, and collaborate with them on solutions. So one of our big challenges are public partnerships to address safety and public health. We will need to establish partnerships with TSA for compliance reasons, especially if we have any food court areas that are pre-security. We also have to address any public health concerns that may arise over time with the use of reusables. We also need to promote equal opportunity as a public organization. We have to uphold our competitive public processes and ensure equal opportunity for new vendors and service providers. And for our tenants, we have to gain their support. To do so, we need to make sure that tenant revenue remains consistent as we implement these programs. And fourth, for our back of house operations, we have to continue training staff and managers, keeping up with higher, oh, previous slide, please. 2 back. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so for back of house operations, we do need to train our staff and managers and keep up with high service sector turnover rates. That requires conversations with manufacturers, suppliers, and distributors as well to make sure that our back of house operations do evolve to be as low waste as possible. So challenges aside, none of our zero waste programs would really be possible without the interest and collaboration of these stakeholders who are actively building the zero waste movement and zero waste here at the airport. Our stakeholders include airport leadership, the City of San Francisco, their Department of the Environment, California policymakers, our neighboring jurisdictions, including San Mateo County, and other jurisdictions that are already implementing similar policies, and our airport tenants and other prospective industry partners. Next slide. So I hope that everyone feels inspired and empowered to embrace zero waste at your facility, whether it's large or small. The recommendations made today are scalable, meaning if SFO with 57 million and an expected 75 million annual passengers, and we currently have 46,000 employees, if we can work our way towards zero waste, we really believe that you can too. If you'd like to follow SFO Zero Waste work, please bookmark our website and follow SFO on social media. We're launching a new SFO sustainability website in January, which will have information and resources to share on the evolution of our programs and policies. Next slide. And if you have any questions, here's my and my team's contact information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, everyone. I've been putting in links to each organization in the chat. You can go back and look if you didn't capture them, but I think I got all of them. And I don't know if I can put in clickable links. I'll let someone else handle that. I'm going to move on to the questions. So let's see, we have a variety and we have about 10 minutes or so. Let's see. So Jamie, there's a question about what were your experiences like with the first test users when you were developing chart reuse? What was that process like?
Yeah, so as I said before, we're in the beta phase. So right now we're working with a number of like large institutional dining settings and folks that manage those facilities. And one of the things that with some of the information that we're learning thus far is that so far there's a pretty clear break-even point with folks that are making a transition, for restaurants that are making a transition. If there's new staffing involved, it makes it hard for there to be cost savings. So part of the navigation of this with our clients that we work with and we seek to coach in this process is to identify how to do this without adding on new staff. Especially if cost savings is a clear goal for them, that the transition from reusables, from single-use disposables to reusables can only offset so much of a cost, and a whole staff person is unlikely to have that type of cost savings in there. So that's one of the big things that we've seen. The other part is that folks are often overestimating how much reusables they need. That it's the mindset of you need less stuff in comparison when you use a throwaway system, that you need lots more stuff. It's hard to like ratchet down the expectations of you don't need to maintain that large of an inventory. Your inventory gets to refresh itself and regenerate itself. So we don't need as much on hand at all times. And so we've seen like repurchase forecasts to be significantly high, or initial investments need to be really high in order to offset the amount of stuff that they are phasing out. When in reality, it's really important to right size purchasing in order to get what you need, but not a whole lot of extra inventory in stock that takes up space and never is not necessarily going to be used. So this is it's an interesting piece that we're just seeing as some users are doing this first effort on it, of looking at, wow, the staffing piece is a real interesting question that needs lots of people to look at, like multiple people to look at it from different angles. And the other piece is to make sure we right size our purchasing.
Great, thank you so much. Let's see, I'm fielding a couple different things in here. I'm completely struck about the potential for collaboration and all of this. It came up through all the presentations. So we know that we need everybody involved in this to make it happen. I wanted to ask you, Jackie, two things. The second's going to be, you're going to get to dive into that unknown destinations, but there's a question about, curious if you've modeled how feasible it is for those 7 policies to go to scale.
Yeah, the 7 action areas, I'm assuming, is what that's referring to.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, and more to happen there, I think. So we came up with those 7 as being the ones that are required to get to the 50% reduction by 2030 goal. The ability to scale honestly needs to happen at the next level when we get to solutions, because it will vary drastically by solution under those 7 action areas. So, at the solution level, yes, we are working on getting better data now on current implementation rates by food businesses, for example, of different solutions. What we do model out, on the capital side, for example, is how much capital is needed. Are we anywhere close to having that amount of capital accessible, et cetera? So we could probably roll that up to the 7 key action areas to have like an overall kind of scalability metric, but I think that would be much more powerful at the solutions level. And then you said the unsold or the unknown destination.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the very quick version of this is that we measure food waste in 2 different ways when we work with food businesses. The first is kind of this, what I would call the standard way that most organizations out there or initiatives out there use, which is add up usually in weight, the total amount of weight of food waste going to each of those destinations. How much is being donated, how much is going to animal feed, composting, anaerobic digestion, landfill, et cetera. Add all that up, and that's your total waste. So we ask for that, but we also use a second approach, which is a mass balance approach, where we say, how much money are you spending on food? What's coming in the door? How much money are you making on the sales of food going out the door? And we have conversions in there, obviously, to account for the pricing differences of wholesale versus retail. But so total in the door versus total out the door, and what's the difference? And what's interesting is what we find is that number is always higher than the simply adding up the weights by destination. And the difference is the unknown food rates, or the unknown destination rates. So you'll notice in retail, I think that was about 30%. So that means there's 30% of food that we know is being wasted somewhere, but we don't know where it's going. That's a very important metric for us when we start thinking about research questions and initiatives and where we want to be modeling new solutions, is trying to identify where that waste is actually happening and where it's going in the first place.
Okay, great, thank you. Evelyn, you're answering the questions that I was going to ask you. You're doing it in the chat, but maybe we want to expand on some of that. I am curious, someone else had the question, but how supportive have the concessionaires and food service providers been in this process? Not just with the legal obligations, but with your vision. And, has there been pushback, or what's that like? Do you hold meetings? I mean, how do you get the word out that they need to hopefully come on board with the vision?
Yeah, it is a great question. So we work very closely. So our sustainability team works very closely with our revenue development team. They're the ones that manage our concessionaires. Pretty much, we can't do anything that we're doing without their support, our revenue team's support. They have scheduled about semi-annual meetings for managers, tenant managers, so they can come in and hear about all of our initiatives. Unfortunately, time is always an issue for them. Food sector, they're very tight on time. So these meetings are 30 minutes and we have about 5 minutes to convey what we're working on. So our best approach is in-person interactions. We have 1 person and soon to be 2 people on our team, and they spent most of their time in the terminals meeting one-on-one individually with all of our tenants, following up on our audits or any questions that they have, doing these waste sorting trainings, that are about 30 minutes in length. And the goal is that we wouldn't have to do those more than once a year. And then we're also planning on just having kind of open to all training. So that way, if any business does have any new employees, they can come by and, you know, offer like stop by for 30 minutes so you can learn about the expectations for waste sorting. We're also looking to work with our HR department to make sure and see if we can offer these trainings at the time of onboarding. So that way, anyone who is expected to work with our material recovery areas, they understand how to use them and what the expectations are for sorting materials at the airport.
Wonderful. The questions keep coming in. At SFO, I think it's just such a bear to manage that you can touch on so many parts of zero waste issues in your complex. So what are your contamination rates for the food scrap bins in the airport? I know that that's the problem with the 3-bin system in general, is that they seem to be equally contaminated. But are there front of house sorters, or do you what are you seeing, and what could help?
That's a very great question and very revealing of what's going on at the airport. So we did a study this summer. We had an intern who helped us, and we did a lot of waste characterizations at different stations throughout the airport to get a sense of the current status of contamination. It's not looking great, and that is why it's such a concern and why we're really trying to work hard to expedite our fiber requirement to get PLA out of the hands of passengers as much as we can. Our rates varied anywhere between 46% contamination all the way up to, I think, 70%-ish was one of the highest ones that we found. And that was very concerning to us, because sometimes we would look at our waste bags and we couldn't distinguish what they were supposed to be, whether they were compost or recycling. So there is a concern there, and we are very optimistic that once we remove PLA, which was the most common contaminant, and those, I'll call them micro contaminants, those small and hard to identify items that end up in compost very frequently. Once we remove those, I'm hopeful that that will really address our contamination rates, at least our front of house ones.
Okay, great. All right. We are going to wind this down. I want to say thank you to our panelists. It was a lively, incredibly informative discussion. I would love to see all these presentations and pour over them again, because I love the data. And I love, Jackie, that you said, you know, that the data is only as good as the actions it will lead to. That's really powerful. So if there's any last words from you, any speaker, I'm going to close it up and hand it over to Stephanie, because we're going to be moving into concurrent sessions. A break and then concurrent sessions. So I want to walk you through that. All good? Okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris and Evelyn and Jacqueline and Jamie. You know, once again, it shouldn't be this hard, and you have really, Re-Fed and Upstream are giving us the tools, and San Francisco Airport, I'm just blown away by what you're doing, because it is, it's like a Disneyland, right? People are coming in from all over the world, bringing all kinds of crazy stuff, you know, and we all come from a different zero waste recycling community, and everybody's confused. So it's just unbelievable. And you're educating a global community. So thank you all. As I put in the chat, please get involved with Re-Fed and Upstream. The easiest way is to get on their emailing list. I mean, they send out wonderful e-newsletters with tons of tools and webinars. And as all nonprofits, we're all strapped for time. So really leverage those opportunities to maximize and share. So, and I do want to say two things before we go into our break. Number one, and this is what they've shown, we need technology, we need apps, we need software, so we need games. So all you young people that are very savvy with this, you know, this is what is needed to expedite what we are doing. And I will put this in the chat, and I'll bring this up again, but there are tons of jobs out there. And in fact, at the US Green Building Conference, we had EPA, Department of Transportation, and GSA, and they are all desperate for people. So I will put those links in there, and please spread the word with that. I'm going to hand it back over to our amazing host, Ruth Abbey, and she will talk about the break and what's going to happen afterwards. Ruth?
Great, thank you so much. Chris, if you could page down a little on that live schedule just to show where we are. I put a link in the chat to the live schedule, and as you can see what's coming up, we just completed our plenary number 2, are moving into a 15-minute break, and then at 10:45 Pacific, we're going to be going into our concurrent sessions, and you can see there's tracks A, B, and C. And if you click on those links in the live schedule, that will take you directly to that other WebEx room. This room will remain open, but there won't be anything going on in here. We're going to be going into those tracks A, B, and C. So measuring, reduce, and food service, culture, communication, and career pathing, zero waste business for community resilience. And then we'll come back here to the main room again for the sponsor showcase and our amazing second keynote address with we're going to have Russ Gibby from CRDC. So we'll come back here after the concurrence, but you're on break now for 15 minutes, and go out to that track A and B, and then come back to the main session at 11:45. Alrighty? All right, thanks everybody.